we take our oath to defend the United States Constitution. And that oath must mean something. Tonight, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain.
It will remain forever. Hi again, everybody. It's 5 o'clock in New York. It is a phenomenon that will be studied for years, for decades, on both the political level and human behavioral level. How Republican after Republican after Republican after Republican has abandoned their morals, their previously stated standards, their compass, to openly embrace the criminally convicted, grab him in the bleep, twice impeached ex-President Donald J. Trump. Republicans, with the exception of a precious few, have seemingly happily and eagerly handed Donald Trump the keys to the castle of a political party that once stood for and saw itself as believing in law and order and believing in a strict adherence to the Constitution and cherishing character. Members of the Republican Party have now hitched themselves to all of Donald Trump's vulgarity, all of his autocratic impulses, his stated desire to use the military on American citizens, his flagrant misogyny, his out-in-the-open racism, and his appetite for violence, once going so far as to incite a deadly insurrection against them, against the U.S. Capitol. In stark contrast to the courage displayed by former Chief of Staff General John Kelly, who wanted to remain apolitical but felt driven to speak out, these men and women know deep down the danger that Donald Trump poses to the country. They know exactly how his policies and his utterances run antithetical, not just to the Republican Party, but to the country, to the Constitution. We know that in this instance because they have said it. Take Donald Trump's hand-picked running mate, Senator J.D. Vance, who made a 180-degree switcheroo.
I'm a never Trump guy. I never liked him.
I got the easiest job in politics because all that I have to do is go out and remind the American people that Donald Trump was the president of peace and prosperity.
And there's Kevin McCarthy, former speaker.
I've had it with this guy. What he did is unacceptable. Nobody can defend that, and nobody should defend it.
I will support the president. I will support President Trump.
And speaking of beclownment, here's Lindsey Graham.
He's a race-baiting, xenophobic, religious bigot. He doesn't represent my party. He doesn't represent the values that the men and women who wear the uniform are fighting for. This is the toughest guy I think I ever met. He's the modern version of Teddy Roosevelt.
I'm sorry. Then there's the group of folks who ran against Trump in 2016 or even earlier this year. But once they realized they weren't going to defeat him, they jumped on the Trump train full throttle.
I bet you all know, you all have friends. You all have friends that are thinking about voting for Donald Trump. Friends, do not let friends vote for con artists.
By giving voice to everyday Americans, President Trump has not just transformed our party, he has inspired a movement.
Donald, you're a sniveling coward, and leave Heidi the hell alone.
God bless Donald J. Trump.
Donald Trump was totally unhinged. Unhinged.
I'll start by making one thing perfectly clear. Donald Trump has my strong endorsement, period.
Why? And it's not just them. Very influential voices in right-wing media, another group of people who know better, also hide their disdain for the ex-president from their viewers, from Republican voters, while touting him proudly and condemning people like me and anyone who criticizes Trump on their airwaves. We know from the Dominion lawsuit against Fox News that Tucker Carlson describes Donald Trump this way in a text message to his colleagues, quote, "He is a demonic force, a destroyer. But he's not going to destroy us," Tucker Carlson texted. "I've been thinking about this every day for 4 years." clearly not the same message he pushes publicly.
This is the most responsible, unifying behavior of a leader I think I've ever seen. I do think the entire point from the famous escalator ride 9 years ago until today of Donald Trump's public life has been to remind us of one fact, which is a leader's duty is to his people, to his country, and to no other.
And there are some others, like Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, who publicly say they'll support the Republican Party's nominee no matter what he does, but save their most damning assessments of Donald Trump for the confines of private, thankfully recorded interviews. In a new book by journalist Michael Tackett, Mitch McConnell describes Donald Trump as, quote, stupid, as well as being ill-tempered, a despicable human being, and a narcissist, end quote. You're all so embarrassing. But it's important for anyone out there still trying to decide what to do. If you're trying to make up your mind with 13 days to go, be careful. Be careful about who you believe, because all those men I showed you, today they're for Donald Trump, but they weren't always. They hated him so much they called him demonic and despicable and America's Hitler. People may not say out loud in the next 13 days, but they actually think. It's where we start the hour with some of our favorite experts and friends. MSNBC columnist and contributor Charlie Sykes is here. Also joining us, writer and editor for Protect Democracy, Amanda Carpenter's here. With me at the table for the hour, host of the podcast On Brand, Donnie Deutsch is here. Charlie Sykes, I start with you.
You know, it's always interesting talking to Republicans who accuse never-Trumpers of abandoning their principles, which is why I so much enjoyed that particular montage. I really wish that shame was a more powerful force in our politics today, that any of those individuals would look at those comments and feel ashamed, would be embarrassed about what they are willing to embrace now that they weren't willing to embrace before. But it's interesting that you started off with Liz Cheney's quote about, you know, if you go along with this, your dishonor will live with you forever. So fast forward to today, where one Republican after another is finding some way either to look away from or rationalize the reports that Donald Trump admired Adolf Hitler. You know, we remember 8 years ago, after the Access Hollywood video came out, that there were some Republicans who still had enough shame and enough pride and enough principle that they were willing to back away. Today, as we are hearing from the people closest to Trump's presidency about what a danger he is, not one Republican has the fortitude to step back and say, this is deeply troubling, I'm off the train. So it's a very clarifying day, and I certainly agree with Matthew Dowd that this could have an impact on that small sliver of the electorate that has been shaking their head and wondering whether or not they are going to put up with this for another 4 years.
You know, Amanda, what's amazing to me is the disdain for the Republican voter, the disgust for the Trump base, that they will say in private to reporters with tape recorders, Trump is a despicable human being. He's a narcissist. That's what Mitch McConnell really thinks of him. America's Hitler, cultural heroine. That's what J.D. Vance really thinks of him. Someone for whom the 25th Amendment was too slow of a process to rid the country of him. That's what Kevin McCarthy really thinks of him. And then go out like it's North Korean state TV and say the opposite in front of cameras. What is that about those men?
It's their conscience has been broken by partisanship. I mean, this is what you see again and again. And, you know, when you played the clip of Liz Cheney talking about dishonor and the clip of McConnell, I was just thinking, you know, there was excerpts in this book that's coming out about his career, about how he cried in front of his staff after January 6th because he was so upset about what they had to go through that day. His wife resigned over what happened. People don't really talk about that. But there was another point in the book where he also cried because he was so happy that he had broken the record for being the longest serving Republican Senate leader. So you look at those two things and it's like, well, which one was more important to him? Clearly, it's being part of the Republican Party, being part of the club, being part of the tribe, right? I mean, he can look at the situation and see this is a terrible thing that happened Donald Trump isn't qualified to be president. But when he was in a position to do something about it after January 6th, he did not go along with convicting him. If he, as Senate Majority Leader, could have convinced and delivered the votes for Republicans to convict him, and we would not be in that situation. He chose otherwise because he thought the partisanship was more important. And so that's just, I mean, it's really hard to grapple with, especially when you think about him sitting, you know, and maybe this is a little bit personal because I've worked in the Senate. Like, I know what those rooms are like. I cannot imagine what the staffers went through that day. It makes me sick. It clearly made him sick. He cried in front of his staff and then turned around and supported the guy who continues to threaten to put the U.S. military to police our streets, to go after the enemies within. And so when you think about dishonor, was it worth it, Mitch McConnell? Was it worth it to be the longest-serving Senate Republican leader if this is what you leave the country with? Look at the biography that's being published of you. Read the title. It's incredible. It's a great title. The Price of Power. We're suffering that price in this election. It may turn out okay, but man, this is tough. This is tough stuff to grapple with.